Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. It's a snowy night here in the Chicago area, and it's probably at least as cold here as it is anywhere else. So that's just winter for us, I suppose. Um, I guess I wanted to start tonight on a couple of things. One is, let's start with this verse from A Course in Miracles. Let me recognize the problem so it can be solved. Now, one thing I know about you, all of you, as I know about practically everybody, is that everybody has problems. And the minute you start looking at these problems, the stranger they get, because everyone has a huge list of these things. There's an old saying that says, a man may have many problems, a man who has no bread has only one. And that's certainly true. But the minute that that man has enough bread, suddenly all the other problems come rolling back. And you may notice in the course of your life that the minute one problem is scratched off your list, particularly a big one that you think, now this clears everything, now everything is great, and then another one suddenly reappears or appears in its place, almost by magic. Even if your own life is perfectly well ordered, you have no concerns about money, health, family, anything of the sort, you may find your attention going to the problems in the world. And there are certainly plenty of these. And you'll start to notice that your mind, in a way, is set up as a problem-solving device, and that this device is very difficult to shut off. And according to the Course, this is actually fairly significant and may tell us a little bit more about ourselves and maybe even more about the nature of reality. So, proceeding. Yeah. Oh, those are, okay, I thought I was using it. All right, so then the question is, what is the problem? We have, let me recognize the problem so it can be solved. And it's starting to look just as if there might be one underlying problem that masks itself as a lot of different little problems. Because if it weren't, there would be an end to this list of problems, and there never somehow seems to be. And as I said, the Course regards this as very significant. So, having started with that, I'd be interested in hearing your responses to the assignment from last week, which is to take a look with some active investigation into attack thoughts. And I would be interested in hearing some of your responses on the live chat, what you came up with and what you observed about them. Multiple attendees are typing. That's good. All right, David, attack thoughts, if observed, make me feel more miserable. By which I'm assuming you mean that once you notice these attack thoughts, you notice that they're making you more miserable, rather than they make you more miserable if they're noticed. Now, there is a great deal, as I said last time, to suggest that just bringing the light of consciousness onto certain things that formerly were unnoticed changes them. Just as, I think the image I used was the roaches in a miserable city apartment that flee the minute you turn on the light. So that is one thing, if observed, they make you feel miserable. But it may be the case, and I'm not quite sure what you're saying for all of this, but it would seem likely that they're making you miserable, and you just notice they're making you miserable. Or paying more attention to them, you're noticing that they are making you miserable. All right. Let me go on to the next. I'm going to take these in order. I had to restrain myself, especially in the office environment, but overall, I noticed a sense of restraint. Now, yeah, this is necessarily the case, because if you indulged every attack thought, you would be in a home right now where nobody was allowed to be in touch with you. These things come up, and all of us, to the extent that we're socialized or properly socialized, have some mechanism of restraining them, which is what civilization is all about. And although, there's this sort of an ideology now of giving vent to your feelings and, being in touch with your feelings and that kind of thing, that's all well and good, but there's still plenty of situations in which you simply have to restrain them. I had them in different forms, a bit more often than I like to admit. I am grateful for a way to quiet this. Yeah, well, one way to quiet, and we'll go more into ways to quiet them. Number one is to notice them. That is to say, this is what's actually going on. To take the initial question in a slightly different angle, to recognize how to deal with a problem, you have to realize that you have a problem. I mean, the classic case of the intervention, where everybody's, the alcoholic has his friends and family surrounding him saying, you have a problem. And assuming this thing works, the guy at least admits, well, yeah, I guess I have a problem. And secondarily, he may decide to do something about it. Let's see. Similar to Buddhist thought, attack thoughts seem to be something that I attach to versus taking a more non-attachment way to deal with something. Well, notice something else here. This is a very good point. And what is this? I mean, and many people who have experience, particularly with Buddhist meditation, with lots of other kinds of meditation as well, will have heard the virtues of non-attachment. And I certainly agree with that. But notice what, when you're talking about non-attachment, in a sense, there's something behind this. That is to say, there's you, and there's this attack thought, or any other thought you like. And you have some kind of choice about your relationship with it. In my experience, when you say you attach yourself to something, you attach yourself to a thought, in some ways you become the thought, at least momentarily. You are this attack thought. You are this insane craving for ice cream or whatever it is your desire or aversion is. One step with it is to say, well, okay, this thing comes up, I see it, and then you have some freedom about what to do with it. It doesn't necessarily mean you let it go, or even in the short term can let it go. But it does create a little space that if I were being philosophical, I could say all of human freedom lies in that space. I refer to those thoughts as the prosecuting attorney. When I dwell on them, I do start to think all is hopeless. When I let go of them, I see possibilities and a better way forward. Well, we can even get into theology in this. Remember the devil? The devil started out literally as a prosecuting attorney. In Hebrew, that is called Hasatan, the adversary, which is what that means literally, as we know, Satan. And if you want to see Satan in action in this way, you can read the opening of the book of Job, where Satan is actually a kind of prosecuting attorney. And he's sort of saying, well, let's see how good this guy Job is. Interestingly enough, in the New Testament, which is written in Greek, the word for devil is diabolos, which means accuser. So both of these things, both of these names, the popular names from Mr. Devil himself, have to do with his role as a prosecuting attorney. And in the old tradition, the devil was not necessarily evil, but he had an unpleasant, particularly from our point of view, duty of serving as the prosecution. Unlike a district attorney today, he not only has the duty to prosecute, but to induce you to do these bad things. That's theology. And the Course has its own take on this. Does it have a personal devil? Well, no, not really. But it does have a devil in another form, and we will get to that. There was a lot of little things that I made bigger than needed by looking or adding negative thoughts. And once I looked at it, most were nothing. Yeah. Well, and this is a point that the Course makes. You are never really, according to the Course, angry at a fact. X happened. You are angry at a judgment about a fact. X person did this, and I think that X person was wrong. Very wrong, horrible, bad things. Here's an idea from the Course that I will throw at you. I'm not going to explore it too much this evening because there's already plenty, but you can never judge accurately because you never know the full extent of a situation. You simply do not. Now, if you were working with the Course has someone who does know the complete situation. And the Course calls that the Holy Spirit, which is like but not identical to the Holy Spirit of conventional Christianity. So those are all very interesting comments, and I really appreciate the fact that you took some time to look into them. If you, as I think most of you would admit, if you didn't find any negative or attack thoughts, it probably means you didn't look. So let us go on. Well, that the fall and the separation are terms you heard last time around. And they are, in a sense, the problem. Now, in a sense, this is a cognitive problem. That is to say, it's a problem with the way your mind deals with and reacts to things. Is it a metaphysical problem in the way things are? Well, we'll get to that. But one aspect of pain, particularly emotional pain, that is very, very common, and see if you agree, is isolation. There's some kind of sense of separation. Some kind of, a depressed person withdraws from the world, typically. A schizophrenic person feels that what he sees and what everybody else sees are two different things, and it's kind of painful and confusing. There's always some element of separation here. And this separation on a, shall we say, cosmic level is called the fall. This did not take place, according to the Course, on some timeline in history. That is to say, God did not get mad at the human race because somebody ate a piece of fruit a long time ago. that is true in a way, but not literally true. It didn't happen, 6,000 years ago in a garden in Armenia. It is our desire to know good and evil, which I talked a little bit about last time. You want to know good and evil? Well, you got your wish, because all of you know about good and evil. You've all experienced it, so have I. So has everybody else. The problem is one starts to feel a bit stuck here. The separation, according to the Course, is both individual and collective. It's individual in the sense that this is something you feel individually, and I would say just about everybody feels some sense of separation from the world, from what is around him or her that is experienced as painful. But it's collective, and it's collective in the sense that everybody is in the same boat. You may feel like you're the only person in the world with this problem, but in fact, everybody in the world has this problem. And the reason everybody in the world has this same problem is that everybody is the same. I mean, literally. It says that God has but one son. And if you're talking about it from the point of view of the Course, God has only one son. You can say son, daughter, child, offspring, whatever term you want to use. I'm using the terms the Course uses, and the Course is using those terms as a kind of corrective to Christian theology, which arguably got some things wrong. So there was this son, child, offspring. I mean, there are lots of different names for the mystical teachings of the world. But this one unitary son, in some kind of way, chose to experience himself as separate from God. As I say, I'm using the masculine pronouns because the Course does. Women, it bothers women sometimes. I'm sorry, but I'm going to stay with this terminology the Course does. It's no more or less true for women than it is for men. So if you could kind of keep that thought in the background, or maybe it'll present a problem or two. So there's this kind of unitary son, and this myth appears all over the world in different forms or others. The son, I didn't write these names down, and they're not important as names because we're not doing that kind of course, but Zoroastrians call this primordial man Gaiamart. In the Hindu tradition, Purusha. The Hebrew tradition is Adam or Adam Kadmon, and so on. There is this man who is androgynous, because this is before any human individuality or any human personality as we know it existed, who for some reason thought, well, might be a good idea to let's see what life is like without the old man, so to speak. By the way, some of you are familiar with Gnostic teachings in which, God, the supreme God, there's a demiurge of God as a kind of a second-rate deity, evil deity. The supreme God is what the Course calls the Father. Second-rate demiurge do I have it in the next one? Well, I maybe do. Let's see what's going on here. Let's go on the causes of separation. These are straight out of the Course. You believe that what God created can be changed by your own mind. One of the most commonly repeated lessons in the workbook, probably the single most repeated, reiterated concept in the workbook, is I am as God created me. That is not what you made of yourself. God is perfect, and what he created is perfect. So what's wrong? Well, you can get a belief in your head that it's different or that you want it to be different. You believe that what's perfect can be rendered imperfect or lacking, to use the words of the Course. Nothing about you, according to the Course, has ever changed, in any real sense, has ever changed or ever can be changed. And there's nothing wrong with it. The only thing to be created, the source of the problem, shall we say, to go back to that, is merely a misperception. And the whole idea of the Course is to correct this misperception. Third, you believe that you can distort the creations of God, including yourself. Well, this is basically the same thing. In fact, these are all basically restatements of the same idea. You believe that you can create yourself and that the direction of your own creation is up to you. Now, one little thing about us is that God's Son, according to the Course, has all the power that God the Father has. Is not really even separate from God the Father. So, although you do not have the power to create who you are because you didn't, you have a very powerful mind that can do a lot. And it can make a seemingly real world. That is to say, the world I see. And this mind is so powerful that we wanted to believe this. And having made this, we've fallen in love with it, so to speak, or feel trapped in it, or whatever you like. So it feels as if there's no way out. Perfectly well, of course, people sometimes talk about suicide, and of course everyone always says that suicide is not the answer. Most metaphysical teachings will simply say, well, yeah, you're just going to get yourself into a bigger mess because you're going to have to face the same problem around, either in the afterlife or in the next life, and it'll be that much worse because, you split from this one. So, killing yourself is not really the way out, as you probably have all already figured out. Now, this illusory self-created self-created in quotes, because you can't create something that is not true. The Course says you have the power to create in the way that God creates, which is, shall we say, lovingly. If you choose to do it the other way, in some way it will be illusory, fictitious, and the sense of yourself is the ego. And the ego is the Course's equivalent of the devil. In fact, there's a line in the Course that says, look at what your life and see what the devil has made. Now, this is not the devil of The Exorcist. This is not the devil of the Catholic Church. This is not the devil, at least, in a conventional view. This is not the personal devil that is known and loved by so many connoisseurs of horror movies and theological classics and the like. This is an organic, constitutive part of you, me. It's not real because God didn't make it, but it feels real because we have enough power in our minds to make it feel very, very real. And the more reinforced this ego is, according to the Course, the more miserable you'll feel. And you're going back to Barbara's comment, when I dwell on attack notes, I do start to think that all is hopeless. You can kind of box yourself into a corner where you feel like there's no way out. And there is a way out. Of course, arguably is one of them. It doesn't claim to be the only one, but it does say, this really could work for at least some people. That some people might include you because you obviously have some interest in it. So this ego is, we all have it. Getting rid of it, well, it's not, over the last, 40 years, there's been a whole, alternative spirituality, integral spirituality, New Age spirituality kind of movement. And it has its own catchwords, and it has its own cliches, and its own shibboleths is the word that comes to mind. And one of these is killing the ego. I remember, I remember any other people talking about, well, kill the ego. Yeah, well, it doesn't really quite work that way. Killing the ego does probably really, being at all realistic about it, is just going to make a meaner, nastier ego, which something you very likely do not need, nor do I. Here's a little more about it. What is the ego? But a dream of what you are. A thought you are apart from your creator and a wish to be what he created not. It is a thing of madness, not reality at all. Now, this goes back pretty much to what I was saying, where you can make this thought that you are apart from your creator. You do have the power to do that. You even have the power to believe in it. But you cannot do it in such a way that it's not madness, and because God didn't do this, it's not real. Of course, we can have a 6-week course on reality if you like, but in the Course's terms, what God created is real. And what was made by the ego, the prosecuting attorney, the accuser, or the adversary, whatever you want to call it, it's always referred to as an it rather than as a he in the Course, because, it's personal, but it's you, or what you think you are. It can't make anything real. It can't make anything permanent. It's just a delusion. Now, a very, very common response to this, to say, well, yeah, you're saying all this bad stuff is a delusion, but it still hurts. Yeah, it still hurts. On this level, it still hurts. Because, you, we, I made this world that has a great deal of power and can seem to inflict pain on us. The way out, which we'll go into much more detail, is A, to realize this fact, or at least to have some glimpse of it, and gradually to see there's another way. I'm sorry. And to repeat a point I made earlier, the ego has made the world. Now, when the Course talks about the world in this way, it almost always means the conventional, everyday world of reality as we know it, which was made by the ego. As I said, this is just my ego. No, not really, because the fall is both collective and individual. In fact, it would even go on to say that your belief in an individuality apart from the sonship is the problem. So this ego has made the world you seem to be in it. You see a lot of little egos. Everybody, bashing each other in the head, cutting in front of each other in traffic, and picking each other's pockets, and so on, so on, so on. And that is the world of the fall. Well, as many people observed, there's a lot that's actually kind of miserable about this world. And it's because it's based on false beliefs. And it's, the Course is often quite harsh in talking about the ego and saying the ego is a murderer, the ego is a killer, that kind of thing. It's, it's only capacity for love, apparently, and it's only an apparent capacity for love, is making some kind of alliance with some other ego. The idea that this will somehow make you stronger, but somehow you and this other ego are still enemies at some deep level. To some extent, that's what my book, Conscious Love, was strongly influenced by the Course, although I don't refer to it specifically in that. But this transactional love, which is pretty much what society is made of, this give and take, is basically a relationship between egos. And although I'll get to this more later, I'll give you the term for it now, which is the special relationship. And what is a special relationship? Just what I said, this kind of alliance you form with some other egos in some kind of illusory sense of safety, because there's a great deal of anger and resentment and jealousy in this whole thing by nature, because that's what the ego is made of. This is bound to be somewhat painful. So how do you get out of it? Well, you transform a special relationship into a holy relationship, and we'll talk more about that again in other classes. But the world is false perception. It is born of error, and has not left its source. It will remain no longer when the thought that gave it birth is cherished. That is to say, if at a deep level you just want to let go of this idea, it can be replaced with truth, the perception of the real world, which is a much better place. But this is a thing that takes, in a sense, the Course talks in a sense in two ways. One, that, and it will often use lines like this, like, this is instantaneous, or can be instantaneous. But in other passages, it sort of suggests, it's, it'll probably be a little bit of a process to let go entirely. And, the work with the workbook is one way of starting that. It is an ongoing process. At what level, the thing is, of course, we don't remember at what level we made this decision, right? To be an ego. Do you remember making this decision? No, you didn't. It goes way, way back before, when you were a little baby. How could I have had this ego when I was just a little baby? This goes way, way before that. This was way, way before that. Your being born as a little baby is one of the consequences. As the Buddhists will tell you, if you look at their doctrine of dependent origination, which is in a way, is identical to the Course, it's pretty damn close. So the fact that, I was an innocent baby, I didn't mean to do this. No, we're not really talking about that. We're talking about a level of consciousness that is very, very much deeper and much more deeply rooted than, your mother took you from the breast too early or anything like that sort. So that's one misconception that, if you need to discuss it more, we can, but it has nothing to do with that. You were born as an innocent baby. Well, yeah, in a way, sure you were. So again, the world that you see is not the world that God created, because the world that God created is nice. It's symbolized by Eden, which is, often called the garden, largely because the most I don't know, the most common and most easily visualized ideal place on Earth is a garden, someplace where there's a lot of nature, but in a sense it's kind of managed nature. As a matter of fact, the word paradise, it comes from a Persian word that actually means garden. I know a woman who actually wrote a book about the Mughal gardens of India entitled Paradise as a Garden. So that's how we envisage it. Notice that in everything, all mystical literature, all spiritual literature, our concepts are always made from things we see in this world. But if it's about this some other world, obviously it has to be different to some degree. So our pictures of things like a garden, or the heaven of the clouds with people in harps or something, these are the closest things we can visage to them, or even, endless light or whatever. These are still kind of, in a sense, the closest you can imagine to these, but it's not. It's not this other reality because, for the most part, we don't experience this other reality. And here's another idea. God did not create a meaningless world. Now, if you will notice, a great deal of suffering today has this sense of a crisis of meaning, because it's not even a question of pain and suffering, because, of course, aside for a minute, people will go through all quantities of pain and suffering if they feel there is meaning in it, if there is some kind of purpose to it. But the thing that torments people so acutely is the belief that there's all this suffering. What purpose? And what purpose is it possibly serving? There's no discernible purpose. Well, according to the Course, there isn't, because we wanted to create a meaningless world. This meaningless world is somehow illusory, and the best thing we can do is, well, you can say escape from it. And what was the last verse I quoted from the Course last time, which was, I can escape by the world by giving up attack thoughts. So in a sense, it's going back to saying, well, these attack thoughts, which is where we started, are the things that are hedging you in cognitively. And of course, the extent you can release yourself from them, the extent to which you can be free and happy. Because these are the ego's products. Attack thoughts, grievances, in a sense, this is what it's made up of. If you want to say, view it in some atomistic way, you can say that these are kind of the atomic components of the ego. And notice they come up spontaneously. It's as if you didn't ask for them. You do have a choice, and occasion, and only if you're aware of it, to say, well, do I want this thought or do I not want this thought? And another line from the Course is, I can elect to change any thought that hurts. That is to say, anytime one of these thoughts comes up, you can let go of it and choose something else. And the whole workbook of the Course, with its 365 lessons, contain thoughts you can replace it with. And in a sense, part of the reason for doing the workbook and doing it thoroughly is to internalize enough of these so that you have some something to replace it with. I'll give you some examples. These are all lessons from the workbook. My holiness blesses the world. There is nothing my holiness cannot do. I am sustained by the love of God. I am the light of the world. There is no will but God's, because God didn't wish anybody any evil and didn't create a world in which there was any evil. I share God's will for happiness for me. I rest in God. The aforementioned, I am as God created me. There is no cruelty in God and none in me. I trust my brothers who are one with me. Remember, the sonship is one being. So your brothers, and it again uses the term brothers in this way, but it means basically everybody else. Like, who are your brothers? Everybody else you can think of in the world, period. This is my holy instant of release. Whatever suffers is not part of me. So anyway, there are 365 of these, or some approximate number. There are many more that are even not workbook lessons. But part of the reason to do the workbook and do it conscientiously is that, well, at least, hey, this idea, I can use this idea to counteract this specific attack thought that I have on a moment-by-moment basis. I will say that if you're able to do this, and it does take some mind training, but then it says this is a course in mind training, you will feel better. You will feel better. To the extent that you're able to do this, this is an attack thought. I don't want this. Instead, I prefer I am as God created me, or there's no cruelty in God and none in me. Any of these other ones, as I say, there are plenty. You'll feel better. You will feel better. Your life will be less miserable. Because my grievances hide the light of the world in me. You are the light of the world. I just read the lesson that said that. I am the light of the world. Well, what's concealing it? Well, only your grievances. And these grievances are apparent. That is to say, they have no substance in reality. But like everything a mind creates, they can certainly feel real to the extent that you believe in them, which we do. And probably by the now, at the end of the second session, you may be wondering what all this has to do with miracles, since it is, of course, a course in miracles, is here. The ego's opposite in every way, an origin, effect, and consequence, we call a miracle. What does that mean? In short, it means this. There is no limit to the power you can release by giving up grievances and attack thoughts. Why? Because your power is infinite. Why? Because you have all the power God has. That's what as I said earlier. So the extent to which you release yourself from this bondage, you have power that's quite surpassing. I will read you the first line. The text starts with 50 principles of miracles. And the number one is there is no order of difficulty in miracles. One is not harder or bigger than another. They are all the same. All expressions of love are maximal. Here's another one. Miracles are natural. When they do not occur, something's gone wrong. So, one step in this course in miracles, and one of the most important and biggest steps, is to recognize grievances, attack thoughts, and to release them. If you can't release them in the moment, and sometimes it's not that easy because we do have to be realistic with ourselves, you take a step back and say, well, at least I'm willing to release this. You still create some kind of space between you and the grievance, even though it feels hard in any given second to let it go then and there. All of which leads quite naturally and logically to this. Let miracles replace all grievances. Every time you have a grievance, you simply can say, let miracles replace this grievance. Let a miracle replace this grievance. I wouldn't be too hasty to judge or determine what this miracle will be or will look like. Because, here's another one. Sorry, I lost that page. This is all page 3 of the text, by the way, the first chapter. Miracles are habits and should be involuntary. They should not be under conscious control. Consciously selected miracles can be misguided. What does that mean? Well, it means that if you have some really very specific result in your mind about what a miracle or even a resolution to a problem might be, you could well be wrong. It could well look quite different. This is frightening, but I think if you looked back on your experience, this is certainly true of me, you thought, you prayed really hard for something. Please, God, give me this relationship, give me this job, give us whatever, right? We've all been there. Often enough, you get what you asked for. It isn't that great, or it turns out you didn't really want quite that job, or, well, that woman was not quite what you thought she would be, and that man was not quite what you thought he'd be. So you, in a sense, prayed for a concrete result, and you may well have gotten it. It doesn't always happen, but we often do, more often than we probably like to think. But very often there's some measure of dissatisfaction in that. It's, in a sense, a consciously selected miracle. But if you're open to, shall we say, a broader and often unforeseen resolution, there's greater freedom and greater possibility for peace. So, it being that time, I'm going to stop my own pre-planned presentation and turn it over to you for questions and comments. I've thought of a miracle as a way of thinking and acting with love, and that's that's perfectly in accordance with the Course. Miracles and love are extremely connected. Notice the miracle is in a sense and the Course emphasizes the miracle is a corrective device because we have placed ourselves in a world in which we imagine something is wrong. In one of my books I wrote, man is the animal who believes something is wrong. And this kind of sense of something wrong dogs us. It's basically problems. Based on our discussion this evening, what would be a good working discussion of a miracle? Maybe I'll go to the book one more time. Miracle is a service. It is the maximal service you can render to another. It is a way of loving your neighbor as yourself. You recognize your own and your neighbor's worth simultaneously. Now, another thing about miracles is you may offer a miracle. You may even work a miracle, not have the dimmest idea if you've ever done anything. and this is something the Course says more than once, your expressions of love, which are, as we've already noted, maximal, uh, will affect and can affect people you've never seen, never heard of, never know of your existence on a physical level. That's probably as it should be. If I have a thought and look at it as an attack thought, is this a miracle? No, but it's the way to open yourself up to it. And, then you can take the thought that's up on the screen now, let miracles replace all grievance. Let a miracle replace this grievance. Looking for specific results. This is true in the world of occult magic, if anyone has ever had any experience with that, which is yet again another subject. Looking for results from anything of this kind, like a magical ritual in any kind of very specific way, is often, as the Course says, misguided. Because the results that should happen, shall we say should, from a higher perspective, are not necessarily the ones that you would expect to happen. So if not advisable to pray for concrete outcomes, what is a better way of phrasing what we reach for? Often referred to as the desires of our hearts. Better to pray for our highest and best and let the Holy Spirit deliver optimum results. Yeah, I would say that's a good approach. I very, very rarely ever prayed for anything concrete and gotten it that was not, guess what, accompanied by a host of problems. Now, some of this is the nature of life because as the Course says, in a sense, the ego's response to God's creation, its replacement is having problems. Problems, attack thoughts, grievances are all, shall we say, constituents of the ego. So I think that's a reasonable way of doing it. With all these things, I mean, the best approach is, of course, to try it and see what works. Since, we're not going through the course, the workbook, in a specific concrete way, because that's not the way this course is formatted, you have some leeway to play with it a little bit. And these are all very good material for things to think about the next time around. Like what is a grievance? How do I release the grievance and have it replaced by miracle? I guess, to give you a little hint in advance, the first step is to be willing to have it replaced by a miracle. Because there are people, and I've done it myself for more of my life than I would care to admit, who are attached to their grievances. Their grievances are, in a sick kind of way, fun. Still worse, your grievances are who you think you are, in many cases. Because, hey, that's what the ego is really all about. So, yeah, it would be a good way to, typically, the person who has some experience with a course in miracles generally will take any given situation and say, well, I turn it over to the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit, we'll get to kind of more theologically, but the Holy Spirit is in a sense kind of the part of God that helps you, that can work in this atonement, which is the opposite of the separation. But say you turn it over to God. Some people who are into the course, say, well, you really have to talk to Mr. Jesus himself. Marianne Williamson is probably the most famous course proponent seemed to say something like this. I heard her speak about 5 months ago. Don't necessarily, I neither agree with it nor disagree with it. Your feelings about Jesus are going to be highly a result of your conditioning. I had a friend who grew up as an Orthodox Jew, and he said, well, you know, every day when I went to school, the Irish kids beat me up for being a Jew. And he said, well, I don't know, as far as Jesus is